An intense night in the sea about to begin. Jim is on a mission to detach a ship called Hispaniola. He has to go on that ship and cut it loose. But there are ruthless pirates in that ship that can kill Jim at any time. Even worse, pirates has guns and cannon. But Jim has nothing but just a boat. He is taking the biggest challenge of his life. If there is even a tiny mistake, it's all over for Jim. As the night falls, Jim is on the most intense night of his life. What will happen to him? Watch till the end, because you can never guess what's coming next. Let's start. The Coracle was a strange little boat. It was light, floated well, and could hold my weight safely, but it was terribly hard to control. No matter how much I paddled, it spun in circles or drifted sideways. Ben Gunn himself had warned that the boat was tricky to handle until you learned her way. Unfortunately, I didn't know her way at all. Most of the time, the Coracle drifted broadside to the current, and I couldn't get it to go where I wanted. I was lucky, though. The tide was pushing me in the right direction, straight toward the Hispaniola. At first, the ship was just a shadow in the darkness. As the tide carried me closer, her shape became clearer. Soon, I was right beside her anchor rope, called a hawser. The rope was stretched tight, pulling against the strong current like a bowstring. I knew one cut with my knife could set the ship adrift. But then I paused. Cutting a taut rope like that could be dangerous. It might snap back with such force that it would send me and the Coracle flying into the water. As I thought about what to do, the wind shifted slightly. The ship moved just enough to loosen the rope. Carefully, I drew my knife, held the rope steady, and began cutting through the strands one at a time. As I worked, I heard voices coming from the cabin of the Hispaniola. One of them was Israel Hands, the ship's coxswain, and a former gunner for Captain Flint. The other was the man with the red nightcap. Both were clearly drunk. I could hear them arguing loudly, shouting curses and throwing bottles. At times it sounded like they might start fighting, but each time the argument settled down again, only to flare up moments later. From the shore I could see the pirates' campfire glowing through the trees. Someone was singing a long, slow sailor song. The words were grim. But one man of her crew alive, what put to sea with 75. It was a fitting tune for men who had lost so many comrades that morning. But the pirates, as always, seemed as cold and careless as the sea. At last the wind blew again, loosening the rope even more. With one final effort, I cut through the last strands. The Hispaniola began to drift, turning slowly in the current. My little Coracle was swept against her bow, and I pushed hard to get away. As I shoved off, my hand caught a thin rope hanging from the stern of the ship. Without thinking, I grabbed it and began pulling myself closer. Curiosity got the better of me. Rising carefully in the unsteady boat, I peered through the cabin window. Inside, I saw a terrifying scene. Israel Hands and the man in the red nightcap were locked in a deadly struggle. They had their hands around each other's throats, their faces red with anger. The smoky cabin lamp flickered, casting eerie shadows over their wild expressions. I dropped back into the Coracle, my heart racing. The ship and my little boat were now being carried swiftly by the current. I could hear the pirates on shore singing their drunken chorus. 15 men on the dead man's chest. Yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest. Yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. Suddenly, the Coracle lurched, nearly throwing me overboard. The Hispaniola staggered in the current ahead of me, her sails flapping as she turned southward. I realized with horror that the ship and the Coracle were being swept out to sea. Shouts erupted from the Hispaniola. The pirates on board had finally noticed what was happening. I could hear their frantic footsteps as they rushed to figure out how the ship had come loose. I lay flat in the Coracle, trembling with fear. I prayed silently, bracing myself for the worst. Any moment, I expected the Coracle to smash into rocks or be swallowed by waves. The hours passed slowly. The Coracle tossed and turned on the waves, soaking me with cold sea spray. I clung to the little boat, sure that each moment might be my last. At some point, exhaustion took over. Despite the fear and cold, I fell into a restless sleep. I dreamed of home, the warm fire at the Admiral Benbow Inn, the safety of familiar faces, and the comforts I had left behind. When I woke, it was morning. The sun was rising behind the cliffs of Spyglass Hill, casting a golden light over the sea. I realized I had drifted to the southwest side of Treasure Island. The sea was calm, and my little boat bobbed gently on the waves. Nearby, the shore rose into steep cliffs with massive rocks scattered at their base. I thought about paddling ashore, but the waves were crashing violently against the rocks. As I studied the shoreline, I noticed strange creatures crawling on the rocks. They were large, slimy, and barking loudly as they moved. Later, I learned these were harmless sea lions, but at the time, they looked like monsters. Between the crashing waves, the sharp rocks, and those strange creatures, I decided it was safer to stay in the water. Looking north, I saw a long stretch of sandy shore near a place marked on the map as the Cape of the Woods. It looked much safer than the cliffs, so I decided to aim for that spot. The current was in my favor, and the sea remained calm. The coracle rode the waves gently, bouncing like a leaf in the water. I lay flat in the boat, paddling carefully to guide myself toward the shore. Each stroke brought me closer to safety. By now I was exhausted. The sun blazed overhead, and the salty sea spray made my lips dry and cracked. My throat burned with thirst, and I felt lightheaded. But I didn't give up. The sight of the green trees near the cape gave me hope. Slowly, painfully, I paddled on, determined to survive. As I sat in the tiny boat, or coracle, I used my sea cap to scoop out the water that had splashed in. Slowly, I started to get my bearings. Peeking over the edge, I studied how the coracle moved so smoothly through the waves. From the shore, waves looked like towering mountains of water, smooth and shiny. But out here, they were more like rolling hills on dry land. Peaks, valleys, and slopes all jumbled together. The coracle seemed to know how to move through these waves. It naturally slid into the lower parts, avoiding the steep crests and the crashing tops. It was as if the little boat had a mind of its own, steering itself through the safest path. I'd better not disturb the balance, I thought to myself, but I realized I could use my paddle in the calmer spots to push the boat slowly toward the shore. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I lay on my elbows, paddling gently now and then to keep the boat moving in the right direction. It was slow, exhausting work, but I could tell I was making progress. After a long struggle, I came close to a point called the Cape of the Woods. The green treetops swaying in the breeze looked so inviting, almost close enough to touch. But just as I thought I might make it, the current swept me past, pulling me further out to sea. By now the sun was blazing above me, and its reflection off the waves was nearly blinding. The salty water dried on my lips, making my thirst unbearable. My throat burned and my head ached. The sight of those green trees so close but unreachable made me almost sick with longing. Then just as I was losing hope, I spotted something in the distance. A ship. It was the Hispaniola. At first I wasn't sure if this was good or bad. Were they coming to rescue me or capture me? But as I looked closer, something seemed off. The ship was moving strangely, its sails flapping and shifting without purpose. "She's out of control," I muttered. "Nobody's steering her." The sails filled and emptied, and the ship zigzagged wildly, first one way, then another. It was clear either the crew was too drunk to manage her, or the ship was abandoned altogether. An idea struck me. If I could get aboard, maybe I could take control of the Hispaniola myself. The thought gave me new energy. I grabbed the paddle and started working toward the ship. It wasn't easy. The waves crashed against the coracle, and once a huge wave nearly flipped me over. I had to stop and bail out the water again, my heart pounding, but I didn't give up. Slowly I got closer to the ship. When I was about 100 yards away, a gust of wind caught the Hispaniola's sails, and she started moving again. My heart sank. I thought I'd lost my chance. But as the wind died down, the ship turned, her stern now facing me. Summoning all my courage, I paddled with everything I had. Finally, just as the Hispaniola drifted close, I made my move. I jumped from the coracle and grabbed hold of the ship's bowsprit. My little boat sank beneath the waves, but I was safe, for now. The climb onto the ship was terrifying. Spray from the sea hit my face, and the ship rocked violently. I nearly lost my grip more than once, but somehow I managed to pull myself aboard, collapsing onto the deck. The deck was strangely quiet. Broken bottles rolled back and forth with the movement of the ship. The planks were dirty, smeared with mud and blood. It felt like a ghost ship. As I moved cautiously toward the stern, I spotted two men lying on the deck. One of them was Redcap, stretched out, stiff and lifeless. His mouth was frozen in a grim smile, showing his teeth. The other was Israel Hands. He was slumped against the railing, pale and barely moving, with a deep wound in his leg. Hands let out a low groan and rolled his eyes toward me. "Brandy," he croaked weakly. Ignoring him for the moment, I went below deck. The cabin was a disaster. Mud was smeared everywhere, and the furniture was overturned. Empty bottles were scattered in every corner. These men had been drinking non-stop since the mutiny. After some searching, I found a bottle of brandy, some biscuits, and a piece of cheese. I also drank some fresh water from a breaker on deck, quenching my terrible thirst. Then finally I handed the brandy to Hands, who drank it greedily. Hands looked at me with tired but sharp eyes. "Where'd you come from?" he asked hoarsely. "I've come aboard to take command of this ship," I said boldly. "From now on, I'm the captain, and you'll obey my orders." He scowled at me but said nothing. I could tell he was too weak to argue. Then he spoke again. "You give me food, drink, and something to tie up this wound, and I'll tell you how to sail her." I hesitated but realized I didn't have much choice. If I wanted to save the ship and myself, I needed his help. "Fine," I said, "but we're not going back to Captain Silver. We're heading to North Inlet to beach the ship safely." Hands nodded. "Fair enough," he said. "You're the boss now." With Hands' guidance, I set the ship on course, steering toward North Inlet. The breeze was perfect, and the Hispaniola glided smoothly along the coast of Treasure Island. I felt a surge of pride. I was now in command of this great ship. But my triumph was short-lived. As I worked, I noticed Hands watching me. His eyes followed my every move, sharp and calculating. Though he was injured and weak, there was a sly smile on his face, a smile that spoke of mischief and danger. For now, I had the upper hand, but deep down, I knew this uneasy truce couldn't last. Hands was planning something. I could feel it, and I had to be ready when the moment came. Jim has taken control of the Hispaniola, but the danger is far from over. Israel Hands, wounded but dangerously clever, is plotting something sinister. Can Jim outsmart him, or is he walking straight into a deadly trap? And with the ship now under his command, how will Jim handle the mounting threats that lie ahead? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more. Watch the playlist for the full adventure, and stay tuned for the next part, where a shocking betrayal will turn everything upside down.